let's get back to some boring subjects.
Understand the risk to our country.
Freedom brings people together.
You're listening to the We Are Libertarians Network. Learn more at wearelibertarians.com.
Thanks for joining us on the program this Saturday morning. We are excited to talk to you on Saturday, March 5th. Well, we're excited to be here. We're thankful we're still here. Hopefully we make it another 10 years. That's right. The 10th anniversary of We Are Libertarians is March 8th, and we're celebrating it with World War III. Maybe. So we're going to discuss whether or not World War III is on its way. And I don't know if it's a debate. It's more of a discussion. We had one yesterday and thought it would be great for you here on the show. So stay tuned right after these messages.
Warning. This show is for adults by semi-adults, so the language is sometimes strong and offensive.
I don't know what I said.
Welcome to the Chris Spangle Show. Our goal is to help you sound smarter while talking to your friends. If you struggle to understand politics, we explain it from an independent libertarian point of view. With all of the irreverence it deserves, we toss out the screaming heads, put people before political parties, and give context to the news to make you think. Now, here's our host, Chris Spangle, a 15-year veteran of politics and media.
Thank you for joining us here on the program today. My name is Chris Spangle here on the Chris Spangle Show on the We Are Libertarians Podcast Network, the longest-running libertarian podcast network. There are shows that have run a little longer, like Free Talk Live, but not many of them. We started way back when nobody knew what a libertarian was or what a podcast was. So we'll talk a little bit more about the 10th anniversary later, but that is March 8th. So thank you to everybody that has listened to the program, that has shared it over the years, that has donated, the patrons that have made this possible. I'm going to mute you, clinking teacup Vaughn over there. The fellas and lady are in the background. I want to thank everybody for, We Are Libertarians is coming up on its 10th anniversary, like I said, and that is, 100 to 150 co-hosts have come through this, writers, researchers, several marriages have come out of it, including mine. Several divorces have come out of it, including mine. And it is the core of our social circle. And we are so glad that you have come and joined us once a week, at least, for the last 10 years and over the evolution. I talked to Joshua Sexton, one of our patrons, who has listened to every single episode of We Are Libertarians on the Chris Spangle Show. That is over 1,500 episodes. And he's said it's better than ever. So it's great to hear from him, and I just want to thank everybody that's been involved and everybody that has donated to our success through Patreon and donating equipment in the early years. To have a network of 13, 14 shows and 20, 25 people currently working on it now is truly exciting, and we are not stopping. We will be here 10 years from now as long as we don't blow up the world. I have had the privilege of talking to several of our patrons over the last few weeks, and I've really, really enjoyed it and gotten so much value from talking to them. I spent really a year in a crisis of what am I doing with this show? What are we doing here? And the message that I heard loud and clear from the people that give us value is that the value that they get out of us is that we help them understand what's going on in the world in a fun way, like you're talking with your friends. That has been the value proposition of the show forever. It will continue to be that way. And I want to ask you for our 10th anniversary to join our Patreon at the $10 level, the 10 for 10. I am not going to be shy about telling you that I want to be doing this full time very soon. And I cannot do that without your support. That means more shows, more videos, more resources for you to share with your friends. I've got a list of about 20 things that I want to do, but I just haven't had time to get to it, do the research, and present it in a way that will be effective in helping you and your friends understand the world. And the end goal is not to, the end goal really is to make them like libertarianism, right? But we don't shill for it directly. We just try to insert those nuggets along the way and help your friends and family see that a freer world is a better world with better outcomes. So thank you so much for supporting us. Please go to joinwallplus.com. That's We Are Libertarians, WAL. Joinwallplus.com. Sign up. $10 for 10 years. Say thank you. If you've ever gotten value out of the show, sign up now and continue to help us grow. Our, it's really important, and the world needs our show more than ever before. I got a great comment from one of them. He was a more liberal leaning. Some patrons say, one said, I'm more of a Hoppe fan, and I listen to you guys for the leftist perspective. And then literally the next patron said, I really like this, but you need more liberals on. You're a little too far right. And third one said that this is the most balanced news program that they've ever listened to, and I really want to dig into that and keep that going. So I can't do it, and I can't do more unless you support the show. So thank you to our patrons. We are adding a new show Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. We will now be doing a show specifically for patrons for $5 and up. So you got to go and sign up at the $5 level to participate and listen to that show. And so you'll get a second show starting this week of the Chris Spangle Show talking about the news. And it is just for patrons. One told me, I'm in the Patreon, but I need more. And I'm like, fair enough. We used to do more. We're going to start doing more. You get ad-free shows. You get the entire back catalog. You can go to 2014 and listen to me say that Vladimir Putin would be the next great dictator. So you heard about ISIS first on this show. I mean, what's not to support? Thank you to our $100 a month members, John Pusilo, Lars Nordskog, Jakey Dell, Matthew Durbin, Reinhold, Christy Avery, and Jason Doolittle. Thank you for indulging me in this little bit of a commercial for our network, for my work, for Patreon. It is important, even if it took us a little long to get into the content here. So we are going to talk today about World War III. Idiot. Joining me is I accidentally removed myself from the video. Harry Price. You have to be the longest running co-host at this point. Greg did 250 shows. I don't know how many you've done, but it's got to be close at this point. And you're the host of Low Key Wall on the We Are Libertarians podcast network, which is going strong. Tell us what you're doing over on Low Key Wall.
Hi everyone. Let's see. Yeah, I think I probably, if I didn't surpass Greg last year, it'll probably end up being this year, because I know I did more shows than you last year. But anyways, the Low-Key Wall, we're working on the media that helped shape us. Low-Key Wall, we're trying just more of like a more culture-based, having more fun, just so you can understand some of the backgrounds or some of the cultural stuff of the your favorite like co-host here on the We Are Libertarians Network. It's just having a little more fun. So right now we're describing a lot of the I'm doing a lot of the anime that helped shape a lot of my opinion. We also got Vincent on there doing some anime and manga, and then Reinhold is also
no I said there. Promote the show. I said make people want to listen.
They do want to listen. And then Reinhold comes out of the clutch with some great content. He actually had me listen to Henry Chapin for the last 3 days of just story music, just turning it on as I sit there and just basically sit underneath the kotatsu and wow, this is good stuff.
I can't live if living is without you is one of the greatest songs. Is that Harry Chapin? No. All right. Reinhold, who is that? It's another one of those 70s guys that died.
I can't remember who that was.
Eric Carmen.
Yeah, Eric Carmen. That sounds right. Yep.
Can't live.
No, Harry Chapin was more of the Cats in the Cradle, Taxi.
Harry Nilsson. So, Reinhold, thank you for all of your support over the years. Thank you for being a perma co-host here on the show. Also joining us is our regular recurring co-host. I heard great things about Reinhold. Almost every patron said, I love Harry. And Trisha got a lot of high marks. Hey, more Trisha. One said, yay, we need more women around. I like Trisha because Trisha is not as scared of the boys. And I said, well, Trisha has more tea than all of us combined, probably.
That's right.
I mean, you've been on fire this week. Every day in chat, you are edgy.
Yes, I don't know, something about war brings that out of me. I don't know. That's probably not a good thing, but maybe it is.
Yeah, and joining us today is in our group chat, we have the pastor of disaster, Vaughn Sparger. How do you say your name? You got to turn yourself on. But Vaughn had some good points and always has some good points, and he is joining us here today. to
Sparger.
share something. Sparger, thank you. So let's get into it. The latest in Ukraine is very quiet. So we talked last week about how there was the invasion and how, kind of things that led up to it. I've done a lot more research. I'm going to hopefully get some time to do some extra shows this week to get you fully up to speed. I'll put a couple videos in the show notes that were particularly interesting. One person on one of these, watching CNN, Fox News, and American cable is a waste of time on this kind of stuff. They're trying to pull you into Team Red and Team Blue. I've enjoyed watching like Sky News, Deutsche Welle, France's, France 24/7 or whatever, and even like some Indian cable stuff. And what you get on some of these things that you can find on Pluto or YouTube is more facts than emotions. And CNN, for instance, these people, they spend a lot of money on hiring experts. And so these experts are there for their names, not there for their knowledge a lot of times, and have a very partisan point of view to trying to drive you to things. But then like Sky News and some of these other outlets, it's public broadcasting. So they're like, here's a professor from a little known college in Canada to give you some facts. So some of that's interesting. And one of them was saying that this conflict is kind of like a husband and wife and a mistress. And she said the first person to blink in that situation is going to be the wrong one. And that's Putin in this case. I don't know that I agree with that. I will say that the more I learn about Vladimir Putin, the less I think he's a nice person. I'm just going to be honest. I think he might be evil and he might be a bad guy. And that's not to say that the Ukrainians and NATO have always acted well, but I think we have to be really clear-eyed about this. We're entering a phase where the news is going to try to recruit you to their side. When you watch Jim Acosta on CNN, he is a homer. He sounds like a broadcaster for a local football team. Who is the Colts broadcaster? Bob Lamey always got, crap for being a homer. He's supposed to be a sports journalist and not root for his team. Well, that's Jim Acosta. He's the Bob Lamey of political broadcasters talking about the bravery of the Ukrainians. And you have to be really clear that the American government, Zelensky, Ukraine.
Chris has muted himself.
Man.
Somebody muted him.
I didn't mute him, so it looked like he can't be controlled with his own mute button.
This must be coming from Russia. These are bots that are getting in and infecting and turning everybody's mics off.
Can you hear me?
They're Russian bots.
I can hear you now. Yeah,
you're good now.
All right. Yeah. Does it sound like I'm on my browser?
No,
Hold on.
Yeah, something was off with your internet for sure.
No, it's like the.
But in the meantime, while we're waiting for Chris, we can sing.
All right, you guys entertain the live stream while I bounce out here.
Okay, Dennis is going to start singing "I Can't Live If Living Is Without You." By who is that by, Dennis?
I'm going to do. No, that was Harry Nielsen. So it's Harry Chapin that we want to talk about, and if you want to check out what I had to say about Harry Chapin, the low-key wall last week, I spent about 30 minutes just kind of going over the minimum basic that you need to know about Harry Chapin. I could have gone on for another 4 hours. What we're doing over there is really kind of a nerd cast, is what I would call it, right? So it's just stuff that we like.
That makes sense. Yeah,
Absolutely.
I totally enjoyed the nerdiness.
Is that why you don't have me on? What? I'm not sitting at your lunch table. Am I at the cool kids table? Or
what?
Yeah, you're too way out of our league at the lunch table.
All right, I'm back. Can you hear me?
I was getting ready to go like, you can't sit with us.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we
can
hear
hear
you.
you.
All
we
right.
just don't want. We're just ignoring you.
All right.
Yeah.
I'll mute all of you.
Yeah, Trish isn't. That's not fetch. You can't be this. You can't sit with us.
All right, so to jump back into it, sorry, my mic disappeared there for a moment, so I don't know exactly what I was saying, but the Ukrainians, Zelensky, they have a definite point of view and they want to draw the West in for their own survival. I can't really fault them for that, but it does mean that we need to be prepared for our team to take a side. Zelensky is speaking to Congress this week. Somebody within the United States Congress who wants us to go to war with Russia, essentially, on behalf of the Ukrainians, set that up. And they're trying to get Zelensky, who is a master of propaganda, and I use that term neutrally, understands what he needs to do to draw the West in to support his efforts for their own survival. Because Vladimir Putin is not going to stop. Vladimir Putin has no intention of withdrawing. Vladimir Putin is about to unleash hell on Ukraine, and we're about to see a lot of really horrible, gory images like we would have seen in Berlin and London in 1941. David Petraeus was on CNN this week talking about, he's the guy who was head of the insurgency for Afghanistan and Iraq and built the surge that turned the war around in Iraq. And he was saying that you have 5 attackers for every 1 defender. And you've got 2.5 million people in Kiev, or whatever we're calling it now. And essentially, they don't have the numbers. They don't have the ground troops to take the capital. And so therefore, they need to drop a lot of bombs and ballistic missiles. Now, I did see on Bellingcat, though, that Russia has enough ammunition basically to last till Sunday, tomorrow. So who knows where this goes. But I want to start out by talking about the propaganda, because you have to understand that even if there is a correct moral side here, and that side is Ukraine, and Putin is an evil man who is hell-bent on taking over not just Ukraine, but Moldova, the Balkans, the Baltic, like he has Belarus. He wants to take over Georgia. He wants to expand his territory out to the Russian imperial map. That may be his intention, right? That he can think that all he wants, right? But if you're running out of ballistic missiles and can't hold Ukraine, you're never going to get to the Baltic and Balkan states. You're never going to take those over. He can wish and dream all he wants, but he's got to actually have the goods to deliver on that. So you're going to hear a lot of that kind of talk, and a lot of listen, he's not helping his case. He's shutting down Western media. He's shutting down Facebook. He's closing off of his society completely. And there's a lot of reasons to watch information about how bad Putin is. But you're going to see on your local media the following. Russia is very bad. They're threatening nuclear war. We need to stop in Ukraine this advancement. And if we don't, he's going to take over all of Europe. And we have to help Zelensky in every way we can to fight in Ukraine. That may be the exact correct analysis, right? Or it could be wildly overblown. It could be wildly, there's no way to tell the future. But watch now for, I just grabbed a screenshot today of, let me see if I can find it here. The Washington Post posted a picture on their Instagram. A nation divided, the U.S. is together on Ukraine. It's like storylines like that, where America's now united. We're all for Ukraine. We're lighting up buildings for Ukraine. Look how brave the Ukrainian people are. These are very brave people. These are very true statements. But when they get repeated over and over and over, you have to remember that is trying to get you to do something. Every piece of information is trying to get you to act or to support something. And the phrase, "we just need to do more," is the most destructive phrase in American government, in any government, really. So you just have to keep your head on a swivel, guys. When you watch this, I am certainly biased towards the Ukrainians. Not going to lie to you. I think Zelensky is incredibly intelligent in seizing the moment of the first few days. The difference between Syria is several factors, but in terms of the American attention between something like Yemen and Syria, other than the color of people being bombed, which I'll talk about in a future episode, but is that Zelensky knew guys, that he had 24 hours to 48 hours to get out there and seize the world's attention. And he acted brilliantly in grabbing our attention and getting us on his side, and it being a struggle between good and evil. And he's a very skilled propagandist. And I say propaganda in a neutral term. Propaganda, Vaughn, why don't you define like propaganda and the history of that word, and why we should look at it a little neutrally as opposed to good and bad.
Well, way to put me on the spot here, but
I don't think your mic switched over to the mic you're using.
Really?
So you might, Trisha, why don't you start with that question?
Hold on.
You can't take now. Her mic's off. What?
Wow.
I try to be professional. I get a little background that has motion in the background. I update the colors so we look like a real news program. And then look.
You know what, though? If you watch even a mainstream news network, this still happens to them. Have you ever watched the EU?
Well,
Those people can't figure out Zoom.
Yeah.
Did you see Daniel McAdams on some station, some Indian station, where I was like, Daniel McAdams got like fat and bloated, and he's the head of the Ron Paul Institute. Yeah. And this guy's just screaming at Daniel McAdams, and the other guy's screaming back at him. And then at the end of the 2-minute clip, he's like, "I am not talking. You have the wrong person."
They had the chirons messed up, and it was the wrong person.
Yeah. So Vaughn, talk about the word propaganda.
Well, I mean, propaganda is just getting your message out. Ultimately, it's doing an effective job of getting your message out. Propaganda can be good if you have good intentions, and it can be true, but it can also be negative and false. But something I often say when I'm preaching, is that the best lies are the ones that are mostly true. So if you can take mostly facts that are true and provable and use that to spin a narrative that fits what you want, even if that narrative itself overall is a lie, if you include as much truth as possible, it's going to do better.
Yeah, like you take the protests in Russia.
Yeah.
That's a true fact. And those people are brave, and those people are about to face terrible consequences for their bravery in Russia. But let's be clear and realistic about like the situation in Russia. That is not a majority of Russians. We have experienced 2 years. We've watched what Russian propaganda and disinformation in America has done to many parts of the right and some on the left. Like, do you really think that the rural areas of Russia who only watch state TV are believing the same things that we believe about this war, that we see our Russian friends? Like, kind of, I really like thought about this after talking about it last week and researching, and to a person who's close to the situation, they said, "You're a fool if you think that these protests are reality." Like, they are reality, but that is not the prevailing wisdom within the country. They support Putin. And once these sanctions went into effect and they can't use their bank accounts, they're really going to turn on state TV and start watching Russian propaganda, where they don't think this war is taking place. They are being told in Russia en masse that Ukraine is bombing itself. NATO is bombing Ukraine, and they're lying to the American people because the
Russian soldiers don't even know.
The soldiers don't even know. And then they shut off Facebook and Twitter and Instagram this week to make sure that they only get the information the government wants them to see. But here in the West, we repeatedly see the protests. The protests are true. They're being shown over and over. And so we have hope that the Russian people are going to overthrow Putin. And that's just not the case, Vaughn.
Mike Meharry actually had a really good article he posted yesterday where he had a friend who was from Russia that wrote a little blurb, and she was saying the reason Putin talked about the Nazis is because that's pure propaganda that's going to get the Russian people on his side, because they have a hatred of Nazis, even if they don't fully understand what Nazis are, that is like down in their bones from World War II.
Yeah.
So that Nazi talk wasn't really propaganda for us as much as it was for his people. And a lot of the stuff he says is for his people, not for us.
So when the Russian ambassador speaks in front of the UN and says incredibly wildly inaccurate things, that's not for any of us. We go, how is this guy going to say this when it's verifiably false what he's saying? It's because they're using the authority of the Russian ambassador to the UN speaking at the UN and Russian state television saying, see what our ambassador is saying?
Yep.
Wouldn't he know better than your Facebook friend who's telling you that the Ukrainians are all basically being that like the Russians are bombing orphanages and nuclear power plants, and these are all lies, because the hallmark of Russian propaganda is to just it's very Goebbels like, say the opposite, say it with confidence and loudly, and repeat it, and diminish the ability for people to find alternative, like the reality, real facts. So you sow confusion. You cause people to doubt themselves and everyone else. And boy, doesn't that sound like the last 2 years on a variety of issues in America too. Russian propaganda is meant to make you doubt yourself, and Western propaganda is meant to inspire you to do the moral good. And they've chosen what the moral good is here. And so now we're entering a phase where Putin's not withdrawing, and we're into the slog it out phase of the war, and everybody needs to take a side. And if you don't, you're not a good person for not choosing the correct moral side, Trisha.
Yeah, I know we've been propagandized here, and like you said, Russia's propagandizing its own people, and Ukraine has every right to defend itself, and Russia is the aggressor in this situation. But they're using propaganda too. If you notice a lot of the clips that are played, like remember the tank running over the car or the ghost of Kiev, a lot of people don't realize. Yeah, a lot of people don't realize they've been in a civil war. They've lost 14,000 soldiers and civilians
from
Ukraine.
Crimea on.
Yeah. So
for the last 8
they
years.
have a lot of footage, and you have to be careful because some of those clips that you're seeing, if you notice that they're very short, 10, 15 seconds, it's probably being reused from something else. Some of them are actual clips. So you have to be careful that, and sometimes it's our government or our, news media that's doing it, not Ukraine.
We've talked about it all the time here. I was having a conversation with somebody 2 days ago, and they were like, why is this way with the media? I'm like, you have to understand, when I started at an AM radio news talk station in 2004, there were 13 people working on that station. When I left 4 years later, there were 2. It's now in a closet. These TV stations, you no longer have a shooter coming out and a producer coming out with the reporter to shoot television. You have a person with an iPad or their cell phone on a tripod, and they're doing it all themselves. At these big conglomerate news corporations, there's overworked, tired, lazy people who are just trying to get their task done. And one of their tasks is to update the video footage. And there's very little good footage. So they just go to they go to Getty Video or one of these, like Storyful, and they grab some footage of the Ukrainian war. They're not checking it. And then they just throw it up there. Yep. Or you'll see pictures of Zelensky in memes where he's sitting with soldiers. You've seen the meme, I'm sure, of him Putin at the 8-foot table, and then it's compared with Zelensky eating with soldiers. Well, that's from a photo shoot in Donbass like months ago. Yeah. Now, does it make a difference? Does it matter? I don't know, but you should be aware that the repetition that you see or the footage that you see, you need to question. I mean, Vaughn, you're about to say something about the Ghost of Kiev.
Yeah, the Ghost of Kiev is literally footage from a video game.
Yeah. If it doesn't make, you gotta, and the thing about it, how can you trust anything? Well, you don't have to trust anything. You just got to give it 2 days, because we live in an open information society where there's fact checkers and message boards all over the place. The competition that CNN now has from Reddit is really important to fact checking Reddit, right? Or CNN. Yep. So give it a couple days before you share some things. It doesn't mean that you have to follow the Russian playbook of never believe anything you see from Western media. That's too far. You're going too far there, Harry.
Yeah, it's the same FOMO that you have with like any like active shooter things. Like before you comment or say anything, give it a few days. Let that thing simmer. Let that thing rest. But yeah, these news agencies hoovered up all the ad revenue from all, like Chris has been saying for years, that they sucked up all the ad revenue, took it to the most expensive cities in the world on the coast, and so they've got all these lazy millennials. Well, I say lazy millennials because they're all in the city and they make six figures and they live in shoehole or crappy apartments on the coast where a lot of that work can happen anywhere else in the world. But they're sitting there and they waste all their money on that stuff, so they don't have the money, the funds to go off and do that reporting because that costs money and they don't want to do that. They'd rather have some stupid office in DC or some other awful place, or and hire ineffectual like intellectuals that when they have these massive panels of 15 people of actual experts who could give good detailed information, but give them like 30 seconds to speak in a round table, and they just kind of like, all right, but now you. So you're not really getting any good information out of there. Yes, sorry, that's my small little rant. But like,
Ace Undead comments, everything should be taken with a grain of salt. It's partially why I have high blood pressure.
This is the most dad joke I've ever heard.
Jacob, I'm stealing that, Ace. Jacob says propaganda doesn't even need to be good at delivering a message. The sheer quantity of it is enough to muddy the waters.
That is literally one of Putin's tactics with propaganda.
Just
flood
the zone.
Yeah. And it doesn't even have to make sense with itself. You could put out 17 pieces of propaganda that all completely disagree with each other, and that doesn't matter because all it's doing is confusing people. I'm seeing it happen. I'm hearing people say all the time, well, I don't even know what to believe anymore because you hear this over here, and then this person says this, and this person says this. Even if they're getting all their news from conservative sources, they're getting so much contradictory information. They don't know what to believe anymore, so they stop having anything to believe.
Yeah.
And just like
for instance, Ryan, hold on, then I'm going to set you up. The meme that you probably saw early on was of, oh, look, here's why we're helping Ukraine because there's biochemical labs in Ukraine. There are 0 foreign biolabs funded by anybody in the world in Ukraine, especially not America. That was just complete Russian propaganda to get you to piggyback off COVID. But you did see, Reinhold, as soon as some of the SWIFT stuff went into place, RT went out of business. You see, when the internet got shut off in certain parts, one American carrier shut off service to Russia. You started to see the Twitter accounts, that were created in February that are just pushing Russian propaganda and have NFTs for their profile pictures. Those started to really dry up.
And so we kind of mocked this whole, Russian 2016, the election, and all the interference and everything else that they did. And the reality was that they have been doing that, and they were doing it, and they're still doing that. They have Russian bot farms over there. They have the desire to convince Americans that we should be fighting against our country. We should be fighting against ourselves, trying to create a civil war, trying to create a race war. Just kind of like Charlie Manson wanted to do. He just wanted to create a race war, right? So they're trying to do that with their propaganda. And propaganda, really, the insidious part about propaganda is when they're using appeal to emotions and hyperbole and other fallacies and things like that in order to make it sound good. Because when you're trying to change somebody's heart and minds, trying to use logic and reason is the harder way to go. But it's the tack that actually lasts longer once you succeed. Using emotive rhetoric, using those types of fallacies to try to reach out to people and hit them in that emotive center that bypasses logic, and you can get them to quickly be on your side, but it's fleeting. It will eventually fall off once people realize they're being lied to. So that's the big problem with that. But yeah, we're seeing a lot of disappearing of a lot of those bots, and that was the thing. I was always against the whole idea of Russia and breaking into the who broke into the DNC and got the mail and all that stuff. I was just like questioning a lot of that, and I couldn't figure out why they would do that, or was it somebody else, until I realized what happened. And what happened was that they knew specifically who was doing this, and they said they had such certainty about it. I realized that the reason that they knew what was going on in those farm computers is because the CIA was already in there. We had already hacked them long before they had hacked us. So the CIA CIA knew exactly what was going on, and that's why they were so confident with that. So once that money starts drying up, we see Italy just took 4 yachts away from oligarchs that were on the list. So really cracking down on those sanctions. I don't know how well it's going to work, but they are trying to target and hit the people who are important to make those decisions and keep it off of the people in the street. But those people are going to have problems with SWIFT being gone. That's going to be an issue with them.
Yeah, so we're going to talk a little bit more about the sanctions and the ratchet up to war here in a moment, but I want to give everybody one last chance to say their final piece on propaganda stuff. So Reinhold, go ahead.
Well, yeah, propaganda is just, like I said, it's appeal to emotions more than anything, and you got to be careful of it. When you see people starting to make emotive arguments, that's when you got to get your flags up and say, hey, wait a minute, let's think about that. Let's really question what's going on here and what you're saying and why you're saying it. And I see that in a lot of politics today. You see it everywhere in politics today. And I think there used to be an anti-propaganda league back in the mid or early 1900s, 1930s, something like that. And it kind of fizzled out because people started actually, trying to be logical and be avoidance of propaganda. But we're hearing the same things that we heard when we were trying to go to Vietnam. We got to stop the aggression of the commies, that we got to stop it in its tracks. So we have to go there and fight them there so we don't fight them here. You're going to hear all of that stuff coming up in the next few weeks.
Yes. Vaughn, go ahead. Final thoughts on propaganda.
Well, I mean, just something to think about is if you're hearing something that just fits so perfectly into your worldview, that's when you need to stop, pull yourself back, and start looking to see if that's actually true. Because if it perfectly fits your worldview, the chances are that is propaganda that was literally written to do that, so that it would pull you somewhere where you don't even realize you're going.
Trisha?
Yeah, kind of echoing what Dennis said. If it gives you a strong emotion, if you get angry at somebody you don't know and things like that, you are being manipulated by propaganda. And it's really easy to, especially when it comes to war, because, people are dying and suffering, and there are bad guys, and, we fear what will happen to our world and our children. But if it makes you so angry that you want people somewhere that you don't know to die, or, to send people over to somewhere you probably didn't know existed, a couple weeks ago, your emotions are being played with, and you have to be really guarded and protect yourself. I mean, I've been guilty of that myself, when it comes to images of war and things like that. But have a cooler head and let cooler heads prevail.
Harry?
All right. So it's not a Chris Bagel show, as I mentioned, China. So just like as you see a lot of the Wilos like out there for China, you see the same things are happening, the same propaganda playbook out there going in Russia, where you see Lao 86 did a great clip video of people in quote unquote Russia, like, hey, I'm a Brit in Russia, I'm a US American expat in Russia. This is how awesome it is. This is why Putin's so better than what's going on, out there in the West. There's tons of these different videos that to help sow seeds of deceit even back here. So it's the exact same playbook that China has done for years from inside there. So it's be careful.
I watched the EU Parliament. I woke up I just haven't been able to sleep well because of all the stuff that's going on over the last week, and I was up at 4 and watching the EU Parliament, and it was it rang like pre-Iraq. It rang, like the footage you see from politicians pre-Kuwait. So I think it's very clear that in 1 to 2 weeks we're going to have a team red and we're going to have a team blue, and they're all going to want to recruit you to their side. And the point of principles is that when that pull is taking place and emotions are tugging at your heart, you have a mental bulwark to hold on to. And it is okay to have conversations to work that stuff out, because these are complex issues. And to say, I want no war at all costs is, that's a principle, right? And then you have all the facts and images and figures that tug at that. But what about the kids and the orphanages that are what about the bombs that are hitting you? What about the suffering that I see? These are all perfectly valid. It's okay to have feelings about all of it, but I think it's incredibly important for people to get in touch with their principles, to work out what they believe first. So when the streams heading in these divergent paths start tugging at you, you are very clear about what you believe and what you think is the right thing to do. Because war propaganda, if you think COVID and all the stuff that we've lived through the last year or 2 years, nothing compared to the lead up to Iraq. So it's really important for you to get in touch with what you think and what you believe and where you think things are headed, and stay informed and read from all these different sides, because you're constantly being asked by every piece of information to do something, to whether it's your attention or a laugh or join a cause. You just have to be aware of that, and it is exhausting, but that is the privilege that you have of living in a free country. That is the privilege that we have, the ability to look at. I saw on LouRockwell.com a video that was just the most blatant Russian propaganda video that I've ever seen. But there are some facts and figures in there that I was like, let me go check that out. I haven't heard about that. And that makes you rethink your foreign policy. It doesn't change the fact that, like, oh, I'm mad at NATO, so I'm going to invade a non-NATO country. Okay. I'm going to fight NATO by not fighting NATO and killing people in children's hospitals. But the point being is that you have access to that information, and you should have access to that information. And good on Elon Musk for saying he's not going to block Russian information. We need to understand our Russian friends. We need to understand our Russian enemies. We need to understand Russian propagandists as much as we see and understand propagandists here in our own country. We have what I'm trying to say is that when Russia builds its Berlin Wall and starts to insulate itself, those people no longer have the privilege of hearing our point of view, or seeing what we see, or talking to us and seeing the humanity in each other. And it's a much worse position to be in than we're in. And so, never forget that you are lucky to live in a free-ish country. So we got to fight for that. We got to fight for that principle of open information at every single opportunity that we have. So with that, we're going to take a quick break here on the Chris Spangle Show. Going to come back and debate whether or not this is World War III. Cheery, happy, fun things on this Saturday. Welcome back to the Chris Spangle Show. Thank you so much for being here. We appreciate you listening to those commercials. It does help us. We really do appreciate your support. We are facing our 10th anniversary. For 10 more years of the Chris Spangle Show and We Are Libertarians, join our Patreon at joinwallplus.com and choose the $10 level to celebrate 10 years. We really do appreciate it. It's a great way to give value back to the network. It supports people like Gingerarchy with Trisha Stewart-Mann and Low-Key Wall with Harry and Reinhold and Paradox and The Brian Nichols Show and Remzo Martinez and On the Run, not Off the Run. Sometimes, Remzo gets a little off the run. But Harry's Low-Key Wall discussion the night of the State of the Union was really fun. So make sure you go check out that podcast and listen to that. Now, is it World War III? I think we need to be very clear-eyed about who Putin is and what Putin wants and what he's willing to do. And a lot of times libertarians fall into the trap of blaming American foreign policy and never seem to get around to recognizing that this is a madman. And because they feel if they say that this is an evil madman who's bent on taking over countries and killing people, then somehow you are siding with American foreign policy. And I don't believe that. You have to be clear-eyed. You have to be a realist about foreign policy and where we're going. And by the same token, you have to be open and accept that America and NATO and the European Union have done things that have led us to this point. I'll put a couple videos in the show notes that you can go and check that out. I think it's Vaughn that kind of has like a little whoosh in the background. Yeah. So Vaughn, just unmute yourself when you're ready to talk. There's like a little fuzzy static. So this week they put sanctions on Russia, and we talked a little bit. I think we talked about it on the show. I talk a lot. I don't know what I said when, but to give you an update, we imposed sanctions on Russia this week, and basically initiated economic warfare on the country of Russia. And I was watching the news this week about the sanctions, and what was Harry? Fuck off. You have to be watching the video on YouTube. So I'm watching the television about the sanctions, and basically what happened is they sanctioned several banks, not the largest Russian banks, but some of the Russian banks that apparently have bad actors. And you saw one of the investors in one of these banks was the Kentucky teachers unions, which went from like $13 million to $700,000 overnight. And of course, Twitter was blaming Moscow Mitch and Rand Paul, and not Joe Biden, who implemented the sanctions. So why are you blaming the two guys that probably had nothing to do with it instead of the guy that actually had something to do with it? So when you put these sanctions in and you take us out of the SWIFT system, it has a lot of effects. And, I'm sitting here going, if the choice is economic sanctions and military action, I guess I'm going to go with sanctions. And I know sanctions don't really work, and we've sanctioned Iran, and they've been out of SWIFT since 2018, 2017, and they haven't really changed or done anything different. Same in North Korea, and Russia has been sanctioned because, by the way, you Putin apologist, he's invaded Georgia and Ukraine before, and has caused massive violence in Syria and Venezuela and all these other places. And he's a foreign interventionist, and yet you can't seem to dislike that foreign interventionist. And it hasn't stopped him or deterred him, but maybe these sanctions will work this time. If only we do it again, it'll work. So as long as we don't go to war with them. And then I'm sitting there going, well, if I'm a Russian, and I'm just like my friends that I met on the honeymoon, just like two really nice people, middle-class Russians, don't really like politics, don't really pay attention to the news, kind of know that it's all BS, but they're just trying to make a few dollars to get a better house and have some kids and travel the world a little bit. And then all of a sudden they wake up one day and their credit card doesn't work and their job isn't paying them. And they're not able to do all kinds of things that they want to do. And upward mobility stops because of Putin. Would I not then turn on the television to figure out what's going on if I'm not a normally informed person? And then will I be told by Vladimir Putin that the West hates you? See, I've been telling you this. They're after us. Russians must fight. You have to join with the Kremlin because this is an act of war. And doesn't that drive Russians further into Putin's arms as opposed to causing regime change? Because if you don't think these sanctions weren't meant to cause regime change, you're crazy. The point was to so cripple the Russian economy, cause them to lose 30% of their savings overnight, that they all ended up... I'm getting like a weird thing, guys, so I'm going to just mute everybody and see if it's me. So if you didn't think that the point of the sanctions was to cause such devastating economic consequences within the border of Russia that the oligarchs and the people overthrew Putin, you're crazy. Well, that's a bold move. Maybe that works. Maybe that happens. The oligarchs, there was an oligarch killed in London this week who was starting to make noise that he was unhappy. They're starting to turn up dead. You start messing with people's money, they do get violent, right? Oh, when you start messing with people's money, they get violent. Maybe they don't act the way that you think that they ought to act. So it could just be another miscalculation from the West in their handling of Putin. But the problem is there's nothing that's going to stop Vladimir Putin. As long as Vladimir Putin is president of that country, he will keep invading countries. He will keep trying to fight the West because that is who he is. He is, you like, man, watching some of the pro-Putin friends that I have, some of the alt-right people that I kind of monitor, they really sound like cops. When my friend Amanda, in Amanda's story in the past, like, she's being abused by her husband and the cops show up and they go, well, Maybe we could have caught him peeping in your windows if you had shaken your boobs at him. See ya. Bye. Have fun. You know, like there's like a real blame the victim mentality around Russia, Putin, and some of these folks. So what is, you know, so you have to just accept that the sanctions are an escalation on the Russian side. And the no-fly zone is being discussed. This is an escalation. It's not a magical umbrella that will pop over Ukraine that Russian planes will bounce off of like Stephen King's The Dome. It is American military planes, European military planes circling the country and actively engaging with Russian fighter jets when they enter the territory. How is that not an escalation that puts us in direct combat with Russia? You are going to be hearing all kinds of information over the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks about the no-fly zone. And you're going to be told that it's a magic umbrella. It's war. Like there's no way around it. So you can support it, but let's not lie about it. Let's be clear-eyed about what this is. So Vladimir Putin, right before we went on, the New York Times reported about Vladimir Putin and his response to the sanctions. And so I'm going to read that article to you before we go to the panel here. So this comes from the New York Times. Let's see here. All right. President Vladimir Putin of Russia on Saturday stepped up his. Oh, where did my cursor go? Sorry. All right. I've got like 3 screens. It's a mess. I don't know where my cursor went. I'm very confused. I feel like I'm giving the State of the Union address right now. Okay, come over here. All right, there we go.
I thought Mac OS, if you shake it, you know, the cursor gets big.
It's not when you pee. President Vladimir Putin of Russia on Saturday upped his rhetoric by describing the Western sanctions imposed against Russia since his military invasion of Ukraine as akin to a declaration of war, and warning that Ukraine might lose its statehood if leaders continued to resist his military invasion of the country. The current leadership needs, this is Putin saying this, the current leadership needs to understand that if they continue doing what they are doing, they risk the future of the Ukrainian statehood, he said in a meeting in Moscow. If that happens, he said, they will have to be blamed for that. Well, that's classic gaslighting from V. Putin over here. He loves to, what did he say yesterday that was just like hilarious? He said something along the lines of like, no, we're in Russia, but it's just like to be nice to people. Like we're here to help them. You know, he constantly says the opposite loudly and forcefully and repeatedly. And he's lying. He appeared to outline his military tactics while threatening that any no-fly zone, as Ukrainian officials have called for in recent days, would have devastating consequences, said the head of the largest reserve of nuclear weapon owners. Warehouses with weapons and ammunition, aviation, air defense systems. It takes time to destroy air defenses. This work is practically done. That's why there are demands to impose a no-fly zone. The realization of that demand would bring catastrophic results not only to Europe, but to the whole world. So basically, I've already destroyed their air defenses. That's why they want this. And if you come and help them, there will be consequences. We hear calls to impose a no-fly zone over Ukraine. It is impossible to do that from Ukrainian territory. It can only be done from the territory of other states. But any moves in such direction will be seen by us as participation in an armed conflict by the country that will create threats to our servicemen. He reiterated his earlier points about the need to protect the Russian-speaking population of Ukraine, much of which has fled to Russia since the start of the war. So our proposals are on the table with a group of negotiators from Kyiv. Hopefully they will respond positively to that. Putin's demands are give me Donbass, Luhansk, and Crimea permanently, and that Ukraine must completely demilitarize. That's never going to happen. He's making insane demands that no one will agree to. And so these peace talks are total BS. Although rumors have swirled through Russia in recent days of impending martial law, conscription, and closed borders because of the war, Putin stressed that Russia did not plan to impose martial law unless there was aggression against Russian territory, which he considers to be Ukraine. He also vowed that conscription would not be an issue. Only professional military servicemen take part in this operation, officers and contract soldiers. Not a single conscript takes part in it, and we don't plan to send them there. Demonstrably false. We've seen repeated use of conscripted soldiers on Twitter videos and through these various conversations. Our army will solve all tasks. I don't doubt it for a second. This is confirmed by how the operation is ongoing. Everything is being done according to plan as the general staff planned it. Doubt that's true. It's the rainy season in Ukraine, and their trucks are getting stuck because they didn't take proper care of their equipment, because there's so much corruption in the Russian military that their equipment doesn't work. And one person said, even if they launched a full-scale nuclear attack, 3 out of 100 of these nuclear warheads will actually ever work, will reach their destination, and they're kind of failing. So now I let's start with Harry, due to seniority. The world's largest nuclear holder, this madman of aggression who's invaded multiple countries, is saying, if you continue to help them, there will be consequences for us all. Should I be panicking, or will the Russian military fall apart and have to retreat? Like, what's going to happen? How worried should we be that World War III is happening?
Well, okay, so the thing is with the whole World War III thing, how you know you're not already in it? How you know it's already started? How you know it didn't start like a year ago? Because the history book might, like the history books, which will be written, hopefully be written, in the future, will probably say that, we probably are, and the war actually started, 2014. We just didn't realize it, because if we're in a different, like generational war tactic. Like this is fifth, because we've been in which aspect like a fifth generational war tactic for a long time. That's been the aspect because like it's not, we're in such a different like age that war isn't done by with like a lot of done by guns and tanks. Like you see this is happening, but what's really being more effective is the information war, getting online, sowing propaganda, sowing distrust, getting people on each person's side.
World.
What?
Yeah, so essentially, you're exactly right. Like Glenn Beck used to say all the time that when the history books are written, the Tunisian fruit vendor that lit himself on fire in 2011 was the Franz Ferdinand moment, because it lit off the Arab Spring, and that the Arab Spring would then rush across the rest of the world. And we've seen places like Trump and Britain, Trump here and Brexit in Britain, and just constantly roiling through, and that's what. You always have to listen to the person who's closest to the abuser. Like, it's one thing for you to say, this guy is really nice to me. I don't understand what you're saying. He can't possibly be that way because I see him differently than you. But you've never been on the other side. You've never been the person he hates. You've never been the subject of abuse because he needs you. He likes you. He treats you with respect, and he doesn't want to present that face to you. And every one of the Ukrainians that I see talking about this stuff, Harry, all say this is World War III. You can choose to admit it or not. You can choose to appease him or not. He is the second largest military, largest holder of nuclear weapons is Russia, Trisha. So she asked me to clarify that. They have more. Us? No, they have more nuclear weapons than we do. Yeah,
allegedly.
Yeah, I don't know.
We have more working nuclear weapons, and ours are on floppy disks. So,
which is. Hold on, but if it's not broke, don't fix it. The other thing with it, like our nukes are in different spots, and also not our nukes. This is also preface. I try to
We're
get
in like 200 some places.
Yeah, I try to get us nukes, but we can't get them. They're United States military's nukes, not our nukes. You two, because like you use of getting uranium to make a nuke is very, very expensive, and it's at the exact same time the Soviet Union was running out of gas and building all this stuff up, and they botched Chernobyl. So like, if these are Soviet era, they really haven't like updated them in the last 30 effing years. Like, so we, yes, and that's why like I messaging with Reinhold talking about like, what would be the maintenance cost on that many nukes? How hard and difficult is it to maintain all that? Like, and the expertise, the knowledge base to maintain all that. Like, because if you have the knowledge to maintain a nuclear stockpile, like, is the Russian government paying you enough? because you could probably make money doing something else. Because I'm sure Elon Musk will pay you a lot more if you know how to do, anything with that. If you don't have pride for your country, you just go work for SpaceX. Get the heck out.
Hey,
But-
Harry, check your microphone. I think you might be on your computer mic. Trisha, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah. Just going back to that, I know that it says maybe on paper, but I have to think that we have more nuclear weapons. I mean, maybe it's American propaganda that's telling us, that Russia does.
It's the UN. We can trust them.
Yes, but
It's also Russian propaganda.
Yeah, I mean that's true. Yeah,
right.
totally.
It's
It
also
would make
true.
sense for both, Russia and the U.S. to lie about that.
Correct. Because
shut down.
Go ahead, Harry, then Reinhold.
I'll just say, all countries lie about their numbers. Russia
Just
saying they only got 500 casualties. This thing is exactly time when China talked about it only has so many different casualties when it's fighting.
Or when a guy tells
freaking
you he's
India.
6 foot tall and you meet him and he's like 5'9".
Yeah, I hate that. Which sucks if you're actually 6 foot tall and people go you're not 6 foot. You stand up I'm actually 6 foot. That's what I
He's
am.
actually kind of short too, by the way.
Reinhold?
Better for judo.
So the point about Chernobyl is an interesting one to make too, that we talk about they have nuclear bombs, but how many of them have we seen them actually use and how they function? And even if they work right, because we've seen their nuclear engineering with Chernobyl, which was terrible. And it was so decrepit, and they also went through a series of bad procedures that they shouldn't have done, trying to get a test completed, which caused that whole thing to melt down anyway. But it's just bad design. So who's to say that all these weapons actually could even fire, even back in the day when they were made, let alone 30, 40, 50 years later?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because we have confirmed tests that they have working ones and stuff like that when they do their tests. But even the United States military, when they launched the nukes on Nagasaki and Hiroshima, they still believed that thing was going to hit the ground and just be a big boom. That's it. It wasn't really going to work. They had no idea.
And that was the only two they had too. I mean, they couldn't have thrown a third one because they didn't have one built.
Right, because the idea you have to enrich this much uranium because you're not getting finding U-235 out in the wild is freaking rare as all heck, right? So you're getting crappy uranium, having to sit there and enrich it, and you're getting a little bit at a time, which that's expensive to even get the enrichment process to even get that freaking uranium to even make one of these things. And the idea, the absurdity that we've got thousands of nuclear weapons we have. Really? Come on.
Yeah, I guess the thing, one of the lessons I took away from COVID is that I tend to think other people are rational like me, and people when they're presented with facts will make correct decisions, and that governments tend to be governed by the kind of the middle, not the extremes. So I can't rule out that Putin will do the exact I thought he was just putting troops, 70% of his army on the border in order to pressure NATO to not admit Ukraine. I never expected that he would actually invade the whole country. I thought he would roll in and occupy maybe he would occupy those two other areas. He would hold them and effectively take them over like he did Crimea, because the world didn't do anything last time. Why wouldn't they just let him take these other two areas? They're Russian speaking anyways. But instead he went harder than I thought. So I think people will make the mistake, and you will see a lot of analysts on cable news make the mistake that Putin's a nut job, that Putin's not sane, that Putin's losing it. Putin, I definitely think there's something going on there. I don't know what it is. He's definitely a COVID freak sitting far away and getting isolated. And maybe that's clouding his judgment. But that this is another thing against the people the West caused Putin to invade argument. The guy gave a speech 2 days before he did it for 55 minutes talking about how Ukraine belonged to him. He's not an irrational person. He told Bush years ago that Ukraine's not a real country, and that he's told every president from Bush on that he wants Ukraine, that it belongs to him. He has a plan. He's very consistent with this stuff. He's acting in a rational manner to him. So the use of nuclear weapons to me seems completely irrational. Like, nobody would ever use a nuclear weapon. So therefore, Vladimir Putin could never use a nuclear weapon. That would be crazy. The Russian military wouldn't let it happen, knowing the consequences. But I have to factor in the fact that Vladimir Putin's rationality is far different from mine. And going back to the abuser situation, like, you know, I would say to Amanda, like, I don't get it. This is, I can't figure out this. And she's like, if you try to figure out crazy, you're going to go crazy. You just have to accept that this person's not operating on the same level of rationality, but is still intelligent and going to make moves against you that don't make sense to you. So I think we have to look at it through that lens. But I think, Vaughn, like the chances of nuclear weapons is not zero, but like 0.00005%. But I reserve the right to be wrong based on that information. But I don't think that people should be scared that this is going to turn into a nuclear war.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing about mutually assured destruction is it's not so mutual anymore. The U.S. has a lot of anti-nuclear missile technologies they've been developing for the past 30 or 40 years, number one. But number two, if the Russians aren't even able to maintain the tires on the vehicles they're invading Ukraine with right now, and that's why they can't go off-road, then what makes us think they're maintaining all those thousands of nukes?
It's exactly
Also,
right. Yeah.
I think that those nukes weren't stolen during the fall of the Russian Empire back in the 90s. There was a lot of questions at the time about where those nukes were and who had them.
Yeah.
And we don't know who's got a lot of those.
Well, Ukraine had some of them, and then they gave them to Russia because the U.S. promised to protect them if Russia tried to invade.
Yeah, there was a whole treaty, and everybody's like, why don't we just sign a treaty with Russia? And I'm like, we did, and they completely ignored it.
Russia just keeps breaking every treaty, yeah. And then they break every treaty, and they're like, Ukrainians broke Minsk. Like, no, you did. No, I didn't. You did. I'm rubber, you're glue. Trisha?
That is actually a pretty decent, like, Russian accent, Chris. Yeah. I don't know. We a lot of the things that we're blaming Russia now, and I know people are probably going to think I'm some kind of Russian sympathizer, and I'm not, are things that we do times 1,000. So the irony of it, I'm not saying, as you said, Chris, this doesn't justify Vladimir Putin, but it needs to be put in perspective. It needs to be put in perspective that, yes, we go and we mess with crazy people, and then just like the meme where he turns around and shoots, and then all of a sudden the crazy person ends up doing something crazy, and we're like, oh my gosh, I did not see that coming. Wonder why he did that. And it's like, just because we're not directly responsible for somebody's actions shouldn't mean that we should, push and poke. You don't poke the bear. And we should take some responsibility in the fact that we poke all over the world. And if we stopped doing that, and we stopped putting sanctions, because sanctions never hurt the intended person, Vladimir Putin and anybody evil, any evil oligarch, is not really going to be that affected by sanctions. The people that live there will be. And it's not going to change his mind. So I think we should I disagree a little bit in the point where we just are constantly talking about how evil Russia is, when there's a reason they got to the place that they are.
All right. So let's open the NATO debate, because the reason I wanted Trisha on is because she's the most hardcore out of our group and all this stuff. Like, you heard her last week say, no, I don't think Northrop Grumman should be allowed to sell weapons to Ukraine. Like, I mean, I get not wanting the government to do it and have taxpayers use it, but they have a right to self-determination and defense, and like they're fighting for their sovereignty. They're fighting to not live under a regime that will, censor them and delete their lives and freeze their bank accounts if they disagree with the so if Putin invades a NATO country, Trisha, we have a treaty with NATO, and this is a defense pact, because countries like Estonia and Poland and some of these other countries, they don't have a military that's big enough to fight Russian aggression. the plain fact is that Russia, we can talk about American foreign policy. I don't know that I agree that we are 10 times worse in aggression. But like if Russia were to invade Estonia, the point of NATO is that, and there's a fighting chance that the overwhelming force of the United States and the European countries is a deterrent in the way that nuclear weapons are a deterrent to keep Putin from invading those countries. And if NATO didn't exist, he'd invade them. I have no doubt about it. It's why he invaded Ukraine and Georgia. They're not in NATO. They're not part of the European Union. And so, but he's not going into Poland. He's not going into, the Baltic states or some of the Balkan states that have NATO alliances. So what is the problem with having an alliance with these countries that is a deterrent for them?
So I don't think in essence, like having an alliance like that and, making it so you're avoiding war is a bad thing. The problem is how they use it. So just like the United States selling weapons, do I trust the United States selling people weapons? No, horrible idea, because it never, whatever they say their intentions aren't their intentions. And as far as NATO goes, we dangled it over Ukraine's head. Ukraine literally thought we're quoted, oh yes, we're going to join NATO, when the Civil War started there. I believe this 2014. But so I just think even one thing I did like that Donald Trump said, which maybe he shouldn't have said out loud, but there's a lot of things he said out loud he shouldn't have said.
Always have like a tenuous grasp of facts.
Yes.
And so like he's like Alex Jones. Like if you go and look at where he got that piece of information, maybe it might be right. Like Trump said a lot of things that were true, but he said it very poorly.
So when he said he might not even, go to war if somebody did invade a NATO country. Now he probably shouldn't have said that out loud, but honestly, it's the right thinking. NATO needs to die in our lifetime, I think.
But doesn't that invite more countries to be invaded and more kids to be killed and more nuclear power plants to be bombed and orphanages to be blown up?
No, because that happens on our watch times quite a bit more. It would just be a different person doing it instead of the United States. So,
anybody else want to jump in? Go ahead, Vaughn.
I was going to say, I think Trish has got one point that we do need to pay attention to is that the U.S. is involved in a lot of stuff we shouldn't be involved in as well. And if you look at the propaganda that Putin is using, the word choices he's using, the way he's talking about the invasion of Ukraine, he's using a lot of the same words and talking about it in the same way that we often as the U.S., and I don't know why I'm saying we, but how the U.S. often talks about their invasions or they're helping various groups in different areas. Because Putin on Russian TV, it is illegal right now to refer to this as a war. It's not a war. It's a military action. He is intervening to save the Ukrainians from the Nazis, according to his propaganda, which sounds a lot like the reasons that the U.S. said they were going to go into various places like Afghanistan or Iraq. And so even though, yes, Putin is evil, Putin is doing very bad things, but because the U.S. has done similar things in the past, it gives him cover and it makes it easier for him to justify it.
That video that I told you about that Lou Rockwell's website posted was literally just a greatest hits of American atrocities. And where do you get the moral authority to tell us that we can't do the same thing? The logic is ridiculous, because if you're you're this YouTuber saying all these bad things that the Americans did to all these other countries are very bad, so that justifies us doing the exact same things. Like, it's very stupid logic. It's not coming from a place like of principle where peace is the greatest principle. It's
you did bad things, so I can do bad things.
We get to hurt people and break things too because you do it, and it doesn't matter how of a greater magnitude we do it towards civilians, because you killed 15 people in a wedding in Yemen. We get to kill 5,000 people in a day in Ukraine. Like, it's the logic doesn't make sense when you see these people. But that's the importance of reining in American foreign policy, so that you no longer lose your moral authority, Harry. You aren't the country that created Gitmo. You aren't the country. And this is what John Mearsheimer, a video that I'll put in the thing, said. He's like, how do you, after the Bush Doctrine, claim moral authority? Like how, and we see it now, like how does Canada and Australia get to lecture Putin and the world about freedom? Like how, I don't think a lot of Western citizens take their government seriously when they're talking about their commitment to freedom and protecting life, when our governments engage in a lot of the same behaviors, be it at a smaller magnitude or a greater magnitude. It doesn't really matter. You've opened yourself up to that criticism, Harry.
Right. Yeah. We just like a lot of the police departments in the United States have lost a lot of the moral high grounds and have to fight really hard to get some of that back. The United States has to do the exact same thing. You can't tell people they can't do things when you have done the same thing. You lose. Yeah, you're right. You lost that part of the table, and you put that chink in your armor so people are able to throw that thing back at you, or like you're doing the exact same thing right now somewhere else.
Yeah, the importance of the liberal. So just to break it down, because the poles are basically authoritarian capitalism in China and Russia and other smaller states, and Western liberal states, Western democratic liberalism, capitalism, and liberalism at its core demands that you respect rights. And so the thinking of the Bush Doctrine was, if we go to these countries in the Middle East and give them democratic liberal capitalism, then they won't fight with each other as much. They won't fight with us as much, because the theory is that liberal states don't engage in conflict with each other as nearly as often as like authoritarian states do. So the flaw in that is that how do you go and try to introduce a theory of government based around human rights and respecting the individual while doing things in those countries, Reinhold, that then diminish your authority as saying that you're a respecter of human rights?
So it makes us look hypocritical, but the way to deal with that is not to ignore the plight of others when they're in trouble and need help. It's to, next time we get into this situation, we stop doing it. We check ourselves. We learn from that. But just like if you had a neighbor who was getting harassed by someone down the street or someone across the in another neighborhood or something like that, getting harassed and tried to get them to give them their property, and they finally just say, heck with it, we're going to move into this property, we're going to take it over, we're going to put you in someplace and lock you up, to the neighbor. Would you not defend that neighbor from that action? Right. Mm-hmm. Whether or not you've had any moral high ground to do that or not, you still want to help your neighbor. And that's really what NATO is supposed to be. Now, the problem with NATO is that it turned out to be a way for the United States to exert influence over Europe by being the provider of their defense. Instead of requiring everybody in NATO to defend each other, it turned into a United States defending everybody. Yep. And that's why our military spending is so high, which really makes our United States arms manufacturers really happy. But it does put us in that power situation that we have a little bit of addiction to. We want that power. We want to be the ones calling the shots. And at some point you have to say, Europe has to kind of take care of itself. We need to help them. But right now the solution isn't United States going in and doing a no-fly zone. It might be Eastern Europe getting together, or NATO, EU countries getting together and doing that. What do you do to stop the aggression of Russia into this point? Whether, all the other session kind of goes out of the window at that point. You have to find a solution, and then we need to learn from this one. So we need to take a really hard look at this once it's over, which I don't think it's going to turn into World War III. I think it's going to be a resolution. I think people are going to come together and push back the aggression, but we need to learn from that we can't be the ones doing that all the time either.
Vaughn, then Harry, then Trisha.
Okay. I mean, I think honestly, if Putin could make this World War III, he would. I mean, he's aggressive. He wants to take all of Eastern Europe. He wants to remake the Russian Empire from before the Soviet Union. But the reason I don't think it's going to get to that level, at least kinetically, is because he just doesn't have the manpower and he doesn't have the equipment. and he doesn't have the finances.
Also doesn't have the world support either, because even his allies are turning on him right now.
Yeah, I mean, China's
Lukashenko
basically
in Belarus came out and said that he was not going to send his soldiers in. Like, the sanctions effectively scared Belarus out of being his only ally in this.
Yeah. I mean, China's basically doing the whole, you went to a party with a group of friends and then one of your friends starts a fight and you're like, I don't know him.
If Russia really because China's being very careful on how they support Russia, and because they allow on Weibo and stuff like that, the Chinese people are talking about how they like Putin, stuff like that. They got that military support, but just like China, Russia has the same problem of the shrinking population issue. So if you lose active male soldiers, there's not thousands more that you can replace them from. And just like China, they're getting to the point where they don't have many men or soldiers that actually have actual combat experience. So they're losing a lot of that. So their actual combat troops are getting spread out. And if you lose too many in this little skirmish, World War III is kind of hard to do when you've got you just don't have many people who have actual combat experience, who have been in the two-way rifle range. But the other thing with the no-fly zone makes no sense. It'd be different because it's just about Russia. The no-fly zone would kind of make sense if Ukraine also had had jets. They're out there shooting each other, and they were crashing, bombing into cities, killing people. Okay, you guys' jets are hurting innocent civilians that are around this thing. How about you put the jets down? Okay, that would kind of make sense. But it's just no. The other thing is just they also have to have the ability to defend themselves, and you have disarmed and messed with your entire populace for so long. It's this is almost and you're in this position anyways because you've weakened your own populace. Because Ukraine is not this bastion of liberty or anything other thing. I think on the World Economic freedom stuff, this thing was in the deep 100s, worse than Russia in the types of freedom in Ukraine.
Well,
so it's not even
they've switched back and forth. Yeah, the guy that Zelensky took over for was a Putin puppet, but didn't you say, Reinhold, at one point that they had libertarianism in one of the parties? What was that about?
Zelensky announced that he was going to form, when he got elected, that his party was going to form as a libertarian party. And
really,
that lasted about 6 months.
Right,
because there was concern that a lot of people in the outside the cities would even know what libertarianism is. So it became more of
an anarchist.
It became more of a combination of center socialist ideology, but it's still a little hint of libertarianism in there. They want to have that in there, but it's not prevalent state now. Sure. And there's some political changeover that's kind of changed that now. But there was a period of time, about 6 months, where they were touting that they were going to be a libertarian party.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, yeah.
Trisha?
Yeah, I honestly don't think World War III is likely. You go through these times where you're scared and you worry about, and you think about China. And honestly, I mean, that's something to worry about. But it doesn't make a lot of rational and logical sense. But then I keep going back to something my friend Chris says. That other people don't act rationally and logically. So I suppose it's a possibility, but right now I don't think it's looking like that. So I think a lot of this doesn't make a lot of sense to me on the part of Russia, which either means they just got in too deep and had too much hubris, or that they know something we don't. I don't know which one is more likely.
It's the hubris. It's the hubris, because we do the same thing. We think that we have the ability to manipulate a disease in a lab and that it won't escape. We believe that we have, as human beings, the ability to fight that virus when it then escapes. We have the ability to start a war on drugs and end drug use. The ironclad principle of government is that, yes, everybody cares and wants to do something. We need to do more. And then when they do it, collective action fails because central planning fails, because it centralizes decision-making under a group of experts who aren't able to see all the different things that are needed. It's the pricing system. It's the market system that negotiates all of these different signals from around the world, and peace acts much the same way. And the more you try to centralize decision-making around Joe Biden, Macron, the German government, what you guys need to know about the German government is how deeply embedded Putin and his decisions were in this. Like the Gerhard Schröder, I don't know if I said that correctly. He was the German chancellor before Angela Merkel. That guy's on the board of a Russian oil company now. And Angela Merkel is the one that blocked all kinds of different sanctions. Like Germany is incredibly up to their eyeballs in need of Russian oil and natural gas to survive, because Gerhard Schröder and Angela Merkel continually killed nuclear power. Like the French use nuclear power and they're not as dependent on the Russians. And so is Schröder just like a puppet of Putin, who's in charge of a Western liberal democracy that's keeping spending for NATO artificially low? Well, I got this article that I want to kind of expand on, but it was basically talking about how this is their 9/11 in Europe. That that Osama bin Laden is out there. You have the coal bombings. You have things that kind of give, there's always the dissenters like the John Mearsheims or the Gary Kasparov, the chess guy. His book "Winter is Coming" is really interesting from the Putin is evil, you need to stop him perspective. Really well written. So anytime you see Kasparov, like he was basically this chess champion, famous in Russia, joined the opposition, Navalny. Anna in our comments, who is from Macedonia in the Balkans, said, watch Navalny's YouTube channel. He joined the opposition. He's a guy who has met Putin, fought against Putin, been very, clear-eyed on who this guy is and what he's doing. And I would say that, like, liberal-leaning journalists and Western journalists fleeing Russia in the last 3 days is not a sign that the protests are going to work. That they'd be staying to help if that there was a chance. You've got to listen to the people closest to this stuff. But Kasparov has basically been saying hard power is all that Putin understands. Hard power is force. It's violence. It's war. Soft power is economic influences and sanctions. It's what we prefer to do because we don't like seeing our boys come back in body bags. Putin doesn't care about that. Vladimir Putin does not care how he looks to the West. He's like Donald Trump in the press. The worse you hate me, the better I look to the people that love me. And that is who Vladimir Putin is in NATO. Vladimir Putin is watching the United Nations pass a resolution condemning him with an overwhelming percentage while he is beating his dick. It makes him hard. He loves it. He does not care about the UN poo-pooing him and wagging their finger at him. He understands hard power. And because of that, the West miscalculated who this guy is, tried to bring him into the fold. This is Kasparov's argument, and I think it's a fairly good one. We have thought that we could bring in Vladimir Putin and the Chinese and give them all kinds of, get them hooked on, the World Trade Organization and capitalism. And if we enrich these countries, then they'll want to endear themselves to liberal capitalism. And it was a mistake because Xi and Putin understand hard power. They are the same thinking as the little dictator in North Korea, Kim Jong-un. Like, he only understands hard power. And you basically fed the beast. Now the beast is big and the beast is biting you. It's like Siegfried and Roy Vaughn. That's the lesson. You feed the tiger, you pet the tiger, it loves me, and then it bites your face off one day. And that's kind of how Vladimir Putin is. We need to understand that like this guy just understands hard power, and we have to I'm all in favor of us like canceling him, right? Like in some ways, like private corporations saying we're no longer going to do business with Russia is a good thing. You're muted. Go ahead.
All right, I'm unmuted. Sorry. My dog just started barking too, so I was having problems. But the one hesitancy I have about private corporations going after Russia is as long as they're going after Putin and his stooges, I'm okay with that. But I'm really starting to get squeamish about how I'm seeing people ban things just because they're Russian, or just because
right,
they
the freedom fries effect.
Yeah, like some college in, I believe it was Italy, canceled a class on Dostoevsky, which has absolutely nothing to do with the war. And it reminds me of what the US did to the Japanese in World War II. And I don't like that direction, because I've known a lot of Russian people and they are wonderful people. And why are we punishing them for something some crazy guy does in a country that they used to live in or their grandparents used to live in? That doesn't make any sense. And all that's doing is helping feed the propaganda machine of Putin. It's giving him more ammunition, because now he can show Westerners saying, oh, we're going to ban this and we're going to ban this. We hate Russia, blah, 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 blah. And that just helps him. We need to stop giving him the propaganda.
Let me go ahead, Harry, and then I'm going to pivot to something else.
I was just going to say, like, Vaughn hates American tradition. It's our tradition to do this, okay? All right.
I told you he's the pastor of disaster.
We are going to get to round up white people and put them in camps. It's good. And how dare you stop this, okay?
No, I would say that, you know, being clear-eyed about Putin and that he's not going to stop, and we've got to deal with him in some way. Do you and I personally have to deal with him? Does America have to deal with him? Does Europe have to deal with him? Who has to do what about a situation where you have a madman dictator who's hell-bent on taking over other countries? And this is going to be the question of, we need to do more over the next few weeks if he is actually going to just start massively bombing cities, and he's just kind of preparing for the second wave of this. What do we do? What does the world do? Who needs to do what? How do we handle it? Let's start with Trisha, the hardcore over here, and get her opinion first.
We as the United States, or us as private citizens?
Let's go with both.
Okay. So the United States needs to not do anything for once in its life.
But there's children being killed.
Well, I mean, if I'm not a fan of like using taxpayer funds to send aid, but humanitarian aid, I wouldn't say is the worst thing that a country could do. Private citizens, I know that there's some gun drives for Ukrainians, which I think is kind of cool. The government could stay out of the way of that. That would be something it could do or not do. But we need to not do anything and then step back. And 10 years from now, we're going to look back and think that was the best thing we ever did. It's just really hard to not do something.
But what happens if he goes and kills Moldovans next?
Okay. I hope he doesn't. But once we insert ourselves into that situation, it's going to make it worse. You know, just because I don't like that whole idea of something evil is happening somewhere, so it's my fault if I don't do something. That's kind of that's a dangerous road, and it's a dangerous path, especially when you're the United States of America, because over and over when we do something, worse things happen.
Harry, why is she a paid Putin asset? Why does she work for Russia?
Well, as we know that Trisha is leaving the Wall Network next month to go join that Russian oil board.
This has been my plan the whole time.
All right.
Putin's known to be a big fan of this show, by the way.
Yeah, big fan.
Yeah. He sent me a starter pack. I've got my mug up here with Pooty Poot.
Get you. Anyway,
yeah, I think Trisha makes a good point, is that we want to do something. It feels like the right thing to do, to help, to do something, to send soldiers over there. But
there's skirmishes like this everywhere. There's tons of different people that we can help. Like, if you really want to help something, I don't know, just start selling statehood to South American countries. If you really want to do something, you know, there's bad things that are happening below, like the United States' border and inside its own border. If there's something you want to do, you want to help some lives, cool. Decriminalize, start decriminalizing things, remove some laws off the books. You can save a lot of people's lives, here in our own borders. Now that may say like, oh, you're just an isolationist xenophobe. Like, no, like there's armed conflict happening over there.
Also, there's armed conflict happening with that tongue.
there's also like coming in Africa. There's stuff happening there. There's stuff in like the Southeast Asian countries. If you really want to do something, we can help police African water from China from overfishing inside of there. And the Belt and Road Initiative is incorrectly like destroys other nations around Africa and the Middle East.
Yeah, where does it stop? And Vaughn, I think the reason that we care about it is because Zelensky's on TV, and like, to be honest, it's a Western Christian nation with white faces. The Ukrainians have a lot of contacts here. We know, we care about it more than Yemen because it's right in front of our face. It's right in front of, it's on our screens, and we're being made to feel that it is important. And you're muted.
Okay. Yeah, I was just waiting. I do think there is something we can do. But the problem is we're looking at the wrong solutions. Like, everyone's saying we got to do something, and they're thinking the only solution is militarily. We got to invade. Well, that's not what we got to do. But there is some things that I think we as the U.S., we as U.S. citizens should be pressuring our government to do. Open up the borders. Let the Ukrainians come over. Let them move here. Let them either just stay here until the fighting's over or even move here permanently. Let them contribute to our economy. One thing that's blowing my mind as I'm watching this coverage is how much of the tech sector is either based in or has offices in the Ukraine. There are a lot of tech workers.
There's so many servers over there. It's a big rigged election. That's how it was rigged. Is Ukraine.
But we need to let them come over. We need to open up the borders. I mean, one of the funniest talking points to me right now is the conservatives saying things like, oh, Biden's letting everyone in. He's letting all the illegals in. Biden isn't letting any more in than Trump did. If anything, immigration is happening less right now than it was during even Trump's time. So let the people come. Let them in. I mean, one of the greatest sins of the U.S. before the buildup to World War II, during that buildup, was we weren't letting the Jews in. We were closing our borders to them, and now we're doing the same thing with the Ukrainians. And you have something personal attachment with that.
So at the end of last week's show, I told you about the 5 Ukrainian orphans that my family hosted, my in-laws last summer and Christmas. They went back January 15th, with all the troops on the border. But, my in-laws were kind of like, what do you think? I was like, I just can't imagine them being in Odessa and being in danger. Oh, me. So it's been a mad scramble for 2 weeks, a week, to figure out how to get them to safety, right? Like, there's realistically not a ton we can do. But here's kind of where it stands. The kids left 2 days ago they left Odessa. About 90 orphans left their orphanage to leave and to go to Lviv first and to go to Poland next. We just finally heard from them for the first time in a long while. They're in Poland. They have a bed. They're in a shelter of some kind. They're safe. That was the first concern. The second concern is, how do we get them here? If they claim refugee status in Poland, that will never happen because of the laws of Poland, because they're wards of the state of Ukraine. And so the minister of social something or other of Ukraine has legal guardianship over them. And if they just sign them over as refugees to Poland, they'll be ingested into the Polish orphanage system. And Poland will only allow you to adopt blood relatives. Well, we're not blood, but we have a vested interest in bringing them here to America for the duration of the war until it's safe to go back. Hopefully there's something to go back to. I am pessimistic about that being the case. But it's been a race against the clock because, Lushenko's on TV 4 days ago showing the push towards Odessa. It's the major port city. They need to take the part of why he wanted to take Crimea 8 years ago is because of ports. So he has launched an offensive from the south and spread it towards Odessa because he wants to take the 2 ports that are in Odessa. And there's probably before the weekend's up or early next week, there'll be massive shelling in Odessa. So it was important to get them out and trying to get them to safety. The orphanage, fortunately, they're not in the Northeast. We've got some contacts in Ukraine. We've got some contacts here. Families that wanted to adopt kids from northeastern Ukraine can't get in touch with them anymore. Don't know what happens. Probably safe, but no communications exist in some of those northeastern parts, and they've just kind of like, you can't leave. You're stuck. So once the offensive on Odessa takes place, they wouldn't be going anywhere. So they're in Poland. Well, I want to thank Senator Todd Young's office for being incredibly helpful and responsive. I've been trying to reach several congressmen's office, Congressman Trey Hollingsworth office. We contacted them and nothing came out of that. They said, go to a website and fill this out. We can set up a meeting for visa renewals in September, to which my mother-in-law was like, they'll be dead by then. What are you talking about? Like, well, this is just how it is. So go to HTTP, click. Like, you're no help. So now we're talking to immigration lawyers. Our goal is to bring them here. I will be coming to the audience, asking them to help us fundraise, because it's not just these orphans for our family. There's about 300 orphans that we have in this network of people that want to come here. And to like bring the humanity to it, when the oldest was told kind of what was going on, he was like, can I bring my best friend? Imagine being him, and like, you're going to a place that's safe, where you have opportunity and comfort and a family, but you're leaving your best friend behind. It's very sad. And talking to a missionary in Lviv, he's like, we're safe for now, but you have to understand there's 300,000 people that have come into the city. The numbers you're seeing are the people who have crossed borders into Romania, Moldova, Poland, Russia. These numbers don't reflect the amount of people that are in country still moving in a country of 41 million people. So the refugee crisis is insane. But I've been really impressed with the Polish and the way that they've dealt with these refugees. And I was completely unaware of what has been going on the Belarusian and Polish border, basically a war between the two countries. Because what happened with Belarus is Lushenko basically rigged an election to be put in power. It was a Western-leaning country. Lukashenko took over. And now he's all right. You guys still there? It just blinked. All right.
We're here.
So in order to tick off the EU, he's basically used refugees as a weapon, literally. And he has been giving travel visas to people in Kurdistan and Iraq and Syria since he took over on travel visas. Travel agents from Belarus are in these areas going, come travel to Belarus. See it. It's beautiful this time of year. And then they are using the military to funnel them to the Polish border. And then using the military to force them to cross the border with guns, standing across them. And there's massive battles taking place between the Polish border guard and these Iraqi Kurds trying to get into the country. And then they try to turn back and go back into Belarus, and they've got guns pointed at them on that side too. And they're all Muslims, and they're Kurds, and they're Middle Easterners, right? They're not white Christian Ukrainians. So there is a video called How Russia's Ukraine Invasion Began with Belarus that I'll put in. That is, frankly, it's just very shocking to see what the Polish government and what the Belarusian government are doing. And it really displays that double standard in a significant way. And for the YouTube viewers, I'll kind of flash it up here. It's by Vice. But it's sort of scary to watch the beginning of, the video here.
W ostatnich dniach nasz kraj stał się celem ataku hybrydowego. Jest to wynik konsekwentnej i zaplanowanej polityki reżimu Łukaszenki, który nie cofnął się przed sfałszowaniem wyborów prezydenckich. My obserwowaliśmy
but, it's tear gas, it's people being pushed up against fences and guns being pointed. It's a real humanitarian crisis, and this is of our making. This is of the making of Russia, America, Assad, the invasion of Iraq, and we should be opening our borders to these people, to the Ukrainians, to the Afghans, to Syrians, to Kurds, and we should be bringing people in to these to live in America. And so you don't get the right to invade other countries, create refugees, and then say you're not welcome here. That's insane. It's immoral. And so I don't just want so basically the senator's office said their visas may stand unless South America, good point. Our drug wars have caused all those refugees to come here. So even if a bill is put on the floor, Democrats and Republicans may not agree that letting Ukrainian orphans in is a good idea. So Joe Biden has to act and allow asylum in the way that he did for Afghans for R5 to come in. And so pressure needs to be put on Joe Biden to make that happen, to allow refugees in. It has to be done by executive order. It can't be done by legislative decree anymore. So while we're at it, let's let these folks in too. So I applaud the Polish, but
я не говорю тут о морали. Вы видите, что ребенок этот просит воды попить, стоят как фашисты. Гестапо включают прожектора ночью, включают громко.
So anyways. Correct. So I guess all you guys can hear the video. Okay. So sorry to YouTube, but you heard great content from me if you're on the podcast. So anyways, Vaughn's right. Let them all in. Open the borders. Let refugees in, especially the orphans, please.
Yeah, I wasn't definitely wasn't trying to say we should only let Ukrainians in. We should be letting all the refugees in.
Yeah, I didn't think you were. I just think that was a great opportunity to kind of show people what's going on here.
It was. Yeah. And it's going to benefit us economically. I'm blanking on the name, but the guy, I just forgot his name. He made a great little graphic novel about that, about how immigration is a net benefit to the U.S. He tore
Ben
apart
Garrison. His name
No, it was not Ben Garrison. I cannot think of the guy's name. It's going to drive me nuts. Wonderful, wonderful graphic novel he just put out about
Cody wrote a great article back when the Wall Reader was about that, how it's actually, and just went step by step, how monetarily it benefits the United States.
Mm-hmm. This is a pretty big name libertarian guy. I just can't think of his name. I'm blanking. I'll remember it after the show's over.
Harry?
Well, personally, we should only get the Ukrainians that are over 6 foot tall, can hit a jump shot, or help out, USA's volleyball team. That's only ones we should get. I don't know. We don't need them here. I think we should build a wall, keep them out. Well, this feels good.
I know, right? It's not
what? Doesn't it feel great to hate foreigners again instead of each other?
We have a total shortage of volleyball players. I mean, there's plenty of people to work fast food.
Exactly. We have that. We need, tall volleyball players. We need people who, if you can't hit a jump shot and you're tall, man, get on that volleyball court. Okay. All right. That's what we need. Okay. All right. I don't need these short Ukrainians here that can't do anything for us, unless they play baseball. We need baseball players right now. Our baseball league is going down, If they can play baseball and get out there, What? I'm not the only one that's, we're going to miss opening day because some millionaires can't agree to hit a ball.
With billionaires?
Oh, sorry, billionaires, right? Billionaires.
Billionaires and millionaires fighting over more money.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Bastards.
All right. Final thoughts on, is this World War III? Yes or no, Harry?
I don't know. It could be World War III. It could also be Civil War at the exact same time and exact same spot you're with, because of like the way, like, you know, new wars are having to start. You know, the cyber warfare and the simple aspect of like the propaganda fifth generational war. Like,
please, we no longer call it cyber warfare here. We call it cybering.
I'm not calling it that. I'm not calling it that. You're not calling. I barely want to call it cyber warfare. Okay,
do people cyber anymore? That's such a not like late 90s term.
They kind of do. There's tons of different things for it. Like, you can get on Meta. They even make some toys with it to help relive the experience. There's a lot of VR stuff, so you actually can touch stuff in VR.
See, there wouldn't be war if we were all in the metaverse. That's all I'm saying.
No, we just have we would just have meta-based war. One of the key topics we're going to talk about that actually on a low-key wall episode coming up, about like when war is turned into a game. You know, what happens? What happens to what happens when war is a game? But I don't know. I doubt that we won't. I think people just use World War III because it's a good buzz title. It gets people to read things, gets people to watch things. It's great for SEO. So when you see Spangle use it, it's great for SEO. Sorry, it's good clicky, you know. But
Harry, cybering.com is available.
I'm not buying that. I do own cyberloafing.ninja that I do own.
Cybering Lofa.
Yeah, but I think it'll be later called War 3 or just a war or something like that. It'll be called that for buzzy things later on. But I think, how can I put this? It's going to be interesting to even watch it break down. I think it can escalate to type of World War 3 or something like that type of level, if you don't give Putin an exit strategy, an exit ramp. Where does he get off? And when he does stop this, what does he get any in this back? And if people's like, no, he can't get any in his back. You kind of have to. It's going to keep marching forward. I'm sorry, like, it's not appeasement. It's just, if you stop here, we'll put everything back. Just stop. He's got to have a way to retreat. If you don't give him retreat, you put him on death ground. And once he's on death ground, they're going to fight till they die.
Yeah. Vaughn, World War III or nah?
I mean, as Harry made the point earlier in the podcast, it depends on how you define war. I mean, there are many ways in which we have been involved in a war with Russia for many years. There was the Cold War before the 90s, and now we have all of this, the cyber warfare going on. There's a lot of stuff going on. There's propaganda, there's hacking. I mean, you could even argue, some people have, that a lot of the what's that word, where they encrypt your stuff and then they won't let you have it back unless you pay them money. A lot of that's coming out of Russia. Yeah, that's it. Thank you, Harry. I forgot the word. We could even argue that's a part of Russian warfare. I don't think we're going to see a kinetic world war like we had in World War II. Not because if he could, Putin wouldn't do it, but rather because I just don't think he has the ability. Today, Russia is not Germany from before World War II. They don't have the capability, I don't believe, to create that war machine like Germany was able to. And that's probably the only thing that's saving us from a kinetic World War III situation.
Joe here. Joe was one of my best friends in high school. Still a great friend. Joined the military. I know for a fact, he says it's called sexting now. I know for a fact Joe did some aggressive cybering back in his day. Trisha, World War III or no?
I'm going to lean towards no. Everybody pretty much laid out some good reasons. I know we all kind of think, oh, but what if, China gets involved? And that's not even that likely. But, I could be wrong. What I do worry about is if there's, people send boots in the ground, especially the United States, but even some of the European countries that will, they're going to try to put in a new, overthrow an election or put in a new leader. And then I think something like that might actually lead to a larger scale, like World War. So, overthrowing governments and putting in, new regimes is always a bad idea. So yes, please just let Putin go home and be crazy there.
Now, for my perspective, will there be a world war? This is the Citadel today, with soldiers in a line that spells out UKR. So yeah, Hell yeah, there's going to be. No, I don't know. I don't think that there's going to be a world war. I don't think it will be like World War II. I just warfare is so different now that it's not with as many soldiers. It is a lot more asymmetrical. I do think that we will provide more Stinger missiles, more Javelin missiles. Those have been very effective. The Javelins, out of 300 Javelins that they had, 285 of them worked and taking down tanks and planes and other things. I definitely think that the United States government is going to end up supplying them with light weaponry like that, maybe even harder weaponry. Putin will definitely take that as an escalation. I just think it's inevitable that there's going to be skirmishes between American soldiers and European soldiers in some way versus Russian soldiers. I just don't think that the public will allow the images that we might see in the coming weeks to not go without some sort of heavier response. Now, does that lead to a full-scale world war where you in Omaha or San Luis Obispo are under attack? I don't think so at all. I think you're absolutely safe. You don't need to build a bunker. Now, the pessimist in me says, how did we bring down Soviet Russia? An arms race. We forced them to do military spending when they had a bloated deficit. Guess what? What if China is using Putin to do that same thing to us? So we have to start spending and spending and spending. This is Europe's problem. Europe has been anemic in carrying their load of the NATO budget. They have outsourced their security to us, and they need to take care of this. This is on them. So when we need to do more crowd pops up, it's Europe. It's the European Union's problem. And I think Russia is very weak based on what we've seen. And I think it's very unlikely that we're going to see fighting outside of Ukraine. Joe, again, former military man, says, we will not join a war unless China goes after Taiwan. Over 80% of our semiconductors are made there. Ukraine offers no economic benefit to join a fight other than a symbolic one. Symbols are pretty powerful, but I tend to agree with that. I think the American government is great at looking like they're doing something to satisfy the question of we need to do more. What are we doing? And they will propagandize it to make it look that they're being effective, that they're helping people when they're doing a limited amount. Look at the sanctions. Sanctions are not all that effective. Dan says, and China will be watching how the rest of the world reacted and ready itself for the case. So I think that the Chinese are not going to act. I don't think they're ready. They're not ready to rise totally. They're very kind of weak in certain ways. And so I don't think China gets in on this. China can't afford, Joe says, to arm their troops fully. War would ultimately benefit them and culling the bloat of the population. And the reality is trying to get soldiers onto Taiwan is incredibly difficult. So you see how hard it is for Putin in 2 weeks to get soldiers into Ukraine. They would have to put them on boats and hope that the Americans and the Japanese and the South Koreans don't bomb those boats. Go ahead, Harry.
The other thing is Taiwan ain't Ukraine, because China is as whole. China has been fucking with everyone around them, and they're fucking with people who actually have military standing. India, reason why like India had kind of sustained and messing with Russia, because India buys a lot of weaponry from Russia because China fucks with India. If China does something like that and the world people go like doing that, India will invade China as well. And Japan said once China moves on Taiwan, they move on Beijing. It's just Taiwan ain't Ukraine. The people actually care. Like there's people actually, I don't want to say it, there's different nation states who have so much at stake at losing Taiwan or just giving China openness to like the open sea and the open ocean.
Yeah, Jacob says China isn't playing the military game right now. Yeah. So I agree. I think a lot of that is overbloated nonsense to try and prepare the people of America for action if we wanted to do something about it.
Right, and China has lost tons of money with this whole property value scheme that they have going on in their country right now, and they have also lost a lot of face internally because one of the things that the Communist Party, the CCP, had kept talking about is that they do not meddle in other people's affairs, and they cannot be seen internally meddling with the affair of Russia going over Ukraine or something happening out there. And they lost a lot of different face because they actually have their Chinese embassy said like, hey, if you're Chinese inside of Ukraine, you put up your Chinese flags, the Russian army will leave you alone. Not the Skeks. They were telling them to take their Chinese flags down and try to, not appear to be, like from the Chinese government.
If I keep letting him go, he's going to keep going, guys. He's
that all sounds a lot like World War III. What Harry just said.
Yeah. Listen, I think it's unlikely, but I was super, super sad the other day, and Reagan's like, "What's wrong?" I'm like, "I shouldn't know history. I should never have. I wish I had been born a dumb person. I wish I hadn't read, the lead up or listened to. I wish I had not majored in World War II documentaries with a minor in Dan Carlin's World War I history podcast, because you see these bureaucrats and diplomats and military men sleepwalking their way right into a major conflict. And all it really does take is for there to be an international incident and one side or the other to blow it out of proportion. I think that the chance is there. It's a low chance that it turns into a long-term, full-scale global conflict where you have evenly matched militaries. But I do think that there's going to be a war in Ukraine for possibly years between Russia and guerrillas basically in Ukraine being armed, just like Syria. I mean, we've seen it too many times in Syria and other places to not understand what's happening here. Like the American military will be sending, trainers, 10,000 trainers, before they'll be sending observers, all that kind of stuff. I do think that there's a chance that Article 5 of NATO is invoked at some point within the next few months if Russia doesn't completely collapse as a military in the next few weeks. There's no diplomatic solution here. It's about Russia deciding they're not going to do this anymore. I just don't. I think you have lived with Donald Trump long enough to understand the psychology of Vladimir Putin. Donald Trump will never admit that he lost the election. It doesn't matter how many Republican paid for surveys and audits that they do. Nothing will change his mind that he won that he lost that election. Like, there is no amount of information, and there are people who are zombie-like who will never be convinced that he lost that election. And so Putin is exactly the same. He wants Ukraine by any means necessary, and it's going to be a real problem. So you just have to decide how much you want your tax dollars being invested, how much of your moral capital you want invested, and just keep your head on a swivel and make sure that you're not being tricked into supporting something that ultimately hurts people. But it's a very tough problem, guys. It's watching horrible images and knowing you can send Javelin missiles to help, right? But does that then lead to something else? Because, then we need to send planes to do the no-fly zone. And then, this isn't working, so we need to send boots on the ground. This isn't working, so we need to do X, Y, and Z. We need to bomb Russian territory. So, where's your line? Where's your red line for supporting and intervening in this Ukrainian conflict? So you're going to be pushed to choose a side very heavily. And you just have to draw your line in the sand. Yeah. And infrastructure for fuel, for planes. Buy flour. There is a real tightening. I think this is 70% of the world's wheat that comes out of Ukraine and Russia. And so buy some flour and freeze it for a day. Take it out. It'll last you for months. Start prepping, Trisha. Trisha has like 300 gallons of gas and she lives in an apartment.
I do think it's smart to prep right now, though. If you think about everything you just said, and on top of the fact that we just got off of a pandemic, and actually most of the economic hurt didn't particularly come from, the actual or virus, but from government shutdown. So we're like, people are hurting really bad. Then, the cost of fuel is going to go even higher. Then you're talking about flour. That does scare me a little bit, because that's generally how, you're a student of history. That's how wars begin.
The reason that the Nazis were able to take power is because the middle class had been middle class and got robbed of everything. And we're so angry about it. And time again in history, when the middle class becomes poor, people are used to being poor. The rich are going to stay rich. It's the middle class that, when they lose something, turns to radical authoritarians, usually, that are going to help give them safety. So, all right, everybody, thank you so much for joining us here on the Chris Spangle Show. Please go join 10 for 10. If you got something out of this, please share with friends. We appreciate you, and we will talk to you soon. All right, what I want to do is I'm going to do an exit and another intro, and I'm just going to split these into 2 episodes. Thanks for listening to the Chris Spangle Show. We really appreciate it. Thanks to Reinhold and Harry and Trisha and Vaughn for being on the program. If you got something out of it, then please share with your friends. That's the only way that we're going to grow. And please join the Patreon 10 for 10, celebrate our 10th anniversary by helping us grow and improve. Thanks again, and we'll see you again next week.
Let's get back to some boring subjects.
Understand the risk to our country.
Freedom brings people together.
You're listening to the We Are Libertarians Network. Learn more at wearelibertarians.com.
Hey, thank you for joining us here on the program today. We're so glad that you're going to be with us. We're going to talk a little bit about propaganda and how to keep your sanity. Take everything with a grain of salt without your blood pressure getting high. So stay tuned. We're going to talk about that. And, is it World War III? We'll be back right after these messages.
Warning. This show is for adults by semi-adults, so the language is sometimes strong and offensive.
I don't know what I said.
Welcome to the Chris Spangle Show. Our goal is to help you sound smarter while talking to your friends. If you struggle to understand politics, we explain it from an independent, libertarian point of view. With all of the irreverence it deserves, we toss out the screaming heads, put people before political parties, and give context to the news to make you think. Now, here's our host, Chris Spangle, a 15-year veteran of politics and media.
I am just going to be honest with you. We went so long this Saturday, we did 2 hours, that I'm breaking it into 2 extra episodes. So if it sounds a little funky in the transition, that's why. But just wanted to thank everybody for listening to the program here on the show. Today joining me is Harry Price, Trisha Stewart-Mann, Von Spargler, and Reinhold will also be with us. We are talking about propaganda. We're going to talk about how you can just keep your sanity as there is a lead up to war. And then part 2 is basically, is it World War III? What should we do? What are we going to do? That may be part 1. I probably should do that one first, just in case the war breaks out before the weekend's over. Like, things are changing quickly. So I've got a COVID episode from 3 weeks ago that I haven't posted because it's just not the right time now. But before we start, I want to thank all of the members of Wall Plus. They're the reason the show and the network exist. And you can get all kinds of great benefits for subscribing. Things like a Wednesday show for patrons, ad-free. And I want to thank especially our $100 a month members, John Pasillo, Lars Nordskog, Jake Edel, Matthew Durbin, Reinhold, Christy Avery, and Jason Doolittle. So thanks for being with us today. Let's get on with the show. All right, very good. I guess I didn't need to have you guys there, but I halfway through, I'm like, I'm just going to go right into it, and I'll figure out the editing mess later.
There you go. There you go.
That worked.
Yeah, he just wanted us here to sit there, be pretty, just sit there.
Yeah, you just made